Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Uncensored CMO. Now, the legend that is David Droga has recently stepped down as CEO of Accenture Song, and he's been in the industry for a full 37 years. And I thought now would be the perfect moment to sit down and ask David what are the biggest lessons that he has learnt from leading our industry over the last 37 years. I think it's fair to say that there aren't that many people on this planet that have had a bigger impact on the world of creativity than David has had. So here I'm asking him for his biggest lessons and what you can take from those. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Uncensored CMO. We've got a returning guest.
The boomerang.
The boomerang. We've got a boomerang. David Droga, welcome back. It's good to see you again.
I'm very happy to be here again. Happy to see you again. With all your fancy equipment, now I have to try harder.
Well, you seem a little bit more relaxed, I have to say, now.
It's almost like the weight of the world has lifted off my shoulders.
Yeah.
What happened? What's happened in the last
What's happened in the last few weeks?
Exactly.
Although I have to say, rumours of your retirement, I think, might be exaggerated. I have a feeling that you're not going to be going quietly into the next stage.
Well, it's not a retirement as such. Originally it was going to be a retirement. And wisely, and, in a flattering sense, they sort of asked me to stay on as vice chair. And I really sort of had to understand what that meant. And they said, well, it's really up to me to decide what that is. But they know my personality is, because I care a lot about what I do and what I've done and people around me, that I get to sort of cherry pick the clients and the projects and some of the acquisitions and particularly the people that I can support and all that. So it's kind of a glorious weaning. As an ex-smoker, I haven't smoked for 20 plus years. You know how you wean yourself off with nicotine patches?
Yeah.
Maybe this is the equivalent of sort of weaning my way off of
I like that.
every day.
I think you and Rory Sutherland are the only two people I know that are vice chairs.
Again, it sounds very fancy, but it is great. Look, I mean, the thing is, as I said, I take any opportunity seriously. So already just in the 10 days that I've stepped into this role, because obviously I had my pedal to the metal to the end of the financial year because I wanted to close it out, with glory and hit certain things and and hand it over in a really great place. But even in those 10 days, I've sort of had some fantastic meetings already, and I've also had a few days where I've been able to just walk my daughter to school or go visit an art gallery, things like that.
How wonderful!
It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
Enjoy life.
No, I know. I mean, I also know my personality. It's I'm a thinker and a builder. So for the rest of it, my life, I'm always going to be contributing, hopefully, in positive ways.
Now, the last few years, of course, you've been CEO, and yes. Accenture Song's had a brilliant growth trajectory over those years. And it's great to see someone with your kind of creative talent leading an organisation. We don't see many kind of CEOs that kind of have your kind of background. What have been the big lessons for you in that time?
Well, that was the whole point of why I took it so seriously, because I think more creative people should definitely be given those opportunities. Because I think that we look at the world slightly differently. And I think that, for some reason, I think people assume if you're a creative-minded person or, a pure creative, that doesn't mean you have a respect or an understanding of business or operations, which is just not true. I mean, of course, there are some creatives that are best left in the playpen and just left with kept away from people and sharp objects who are inspiring. But at the same time, I mean, creative people is just a way you look at things and frame things and unpack things. And I've always been very proud to be a creative first and to my marrow. But I understood the mechanics of business as a way in the early days when I started, to protect my belief system. I didn't want to just be just a hired gun or someone who's just a thinker and paid by the hour or paid by the project. I wanted to build a robust business. I wanted to understand the clients because we're not, as I said, we're not in fine arts gallery, and we are in the business in a capital market, and people pay us millions and millions of dollars to do things that are hopefully worth billions and billions of dollars. You have to have a business mind to that. So the last, that's what, going back to your question, the last 4 years as CEO of Song was a privilege. It was very all-consuming, but I'm a person who I'm a mission-based person. And I didn't want to let the team down because, I'd hate to be a poster child of that's why you shouldn't put a creative in charge. And hopefully for any of the successes I've had with brilliant teams behind me and around me, it would hopefully open a lot more doors for creatives in boardrooms. I really would hope that. And I would say that because I think it's better for business as well. That will actually make it work.
I mean, to that point, do we value creativity enough? Because if you look at kind of tech, there's huge multiples on tech companies, massive margins, and it comes to the creative industries, and it seems to be low margin, not valued enough as it should be. Do you think we need to change how we view the role of creativity? Well,
definitely, but I think it's also the way creativity is framed. For some reason, creativity is framed as just the sort of the veneer on things. Creativity is essentially much more than that. It's the idea. Sometimes it's the essence of everything. The tech companies, look, they're not really paid for just by the hour, or they're not really in the service business. I think that's the flaw. The business model of advertising and marketing is the biggest barrier. I think the necessity for creativity and originality and uniqueness and style and design and taste and understanding, I think there's never been more of a premium need for that. But I think the business model is what we need to do.
Talking about your point about reframing the model for creativity, last year I did this thing with Adam Morgan and Peter Field called The Extraordinary Cost of Being Dull. And we tried to actually work out how much our business is losing by basically doing boring creative work. And in the US alone, just on video, we worked out it was something like $180 billion gets wasted on ads that make zero difference. And just to illustrate it, we came up with this. Adam said to me last year, he said, John, let's find the most boring thing we possibly can, like a film of cows eating grass, and test that against all the best adverts in the world. And how would it do? And cows eating grass was more interesting to people than 50% of the ads that we could find.
Well, there's so many points to unpack in that one as well, because cows eating grass actually is more interesting, and you don't see that every day on television, so it's already unique. It's a weird thing in so many categories where the averages is the norm, and it's people's aspirations are to be average. Because they want to be of a category, they want to be of a type. You know what I mean? And so they aspire for the middle, because then they do this. They worry that if they go too extreme, they sort of lose on the edges. And then everything blends. Why does every car commercial kind of look the same? Why does every pharmaceutical commercial or bank commercial kind of look the same? It's beer. They almost have the same uniforms of conformity, and it's strange. And I understand why that happened when categories were being created, because you sort of people want to project or signal where they are or who they are and stuff like that. And they saw if a reputable car company had this field, and if you could be like them, that put you in the same class. But people's need to sort of replicate category leaders, they didn't realize they're not really... A category leader can still be failing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So people started, they've been following the wrong pace car all the time. And I think that's the problem. And as I said, things are written by, research and conformity. That's why everything is bland. Look out the window. That's why most architecture is bland. That's why most music is formulaic. That's why most advertising and films are, people appeal to the middle because they think they're going to get more people. And more now where, people are looking for uniqueness and differentiation and personality and stuff like that, it's always a return back to the creatives. And again, there's enough examples of companies that have mastered storytelling or creativity with engineering or with a business, the business of or the mechanics of something, and created something unique. Apple's obviously an obvious one. You could pick some of the German car manufacturers. Tesla, put aside the politics of that one. There's great design never goes out of style. Great insight, great communication, great storytelling never ever goes out of style. But there was decision makers and bean counters would make decisions and engineer things into mediocre places. And so when creativity, as I said, even with the onslaught of AI, which is going to be incredible, and everyone's sort of caught up in the excitement and euphoria of we can do all these things that are very familiar really fast and really cheap. And that's just exciting and interesting at this stage. But everything's eventually going to look the same because everyone's going to have access to exactly the same. And when everyone looks the same, again, we're going to have the cows in a field thing.
Yeah. Well, did you know, it's funny you mentioned cars, because actually in the study we looked at all the car logos and how the car logos are going to become the same. The side profile of cars, in fact, we had 40 cars in the same category. So these are small SUVs, right? And we took the logos off. and you couldn't work out which one was which. You couldn't tell the Mercedes from the Kia. We did the same thing with fashion. This was the crazy thing, because we thought, well, surely fashion, if there was ever a category that's going to be distinctive and different, we showed the logos 20 years ago and the logos today, and it's just become the same. It's like this massive homogenization, and then, as you say, you put technology in, we just get to do that quicker and more cheaply.
I mean, it is amazing. As I said, people find comfort in familiarity to a point, and then it all starts to tumble away, because unless there's a point of difference, if you're the same as everybody else in any category, what business case do you have? You know, if people have heard me say this about opinions as well. You know, if I have 10 people who work for me, and if all 10 people agree, then 10 people aren't necessary.
Yes.
You need different points of view. Now, you need consensus to move forward with certain things, but 10 people who all agree on everything and have exactly the same taste and all that sort of makes for one very dull future.
Now, I love the way you framed Accenture Song as creative-led, tech-enabled, as a lovely kind of balance those two things. I mean, talking about that risk that technology is going to homogenize and potentially kill creativity, how do you kind of use technology to release creativity?
Well, I don't think it's funny, because you know it's not like technology is a new thing. It's all the time. Everything's been technology, you know, that's moved us forward. Sort of technology has made life easier for us since, you know, almost the dawn of time. But I think obviously the pace at which technology has moved into industries and playing catch up has changed. But, you know, all technology has been amplified and been brought alive by creativity. It all has. You know what I mean? Once the technology becomes the common denominator, that it's the creative minds and that sort of seep into it and change it and do stuff with it. So I'm not one of those people sort of naysayers who are saying that, well, technology is going to kill us and it's going to wipe us all out. It's more, as I said, the lazy people who are going to allow that to happen, surrender to it. You know, but I think the beautiful thing about humanity and people is that there's a tenacity to us and an improvisation and a need to tweak and change and bend and there's emotion baked in stuff and all that. And I think that we can bend it to our will. The best stuff has always happened that way. And it's allowed, and they don't always have to be creatives as designers or writers or anything like that. You know, a lot of times, you know, some of the geniuses in Silicon Valley, you know, they took the emerging technology, digital, and they sort of input their ideas or their ambitions into it, and they just allowed them to do things they couldn't do before. And I'm excited for what's going to happen with, yes, the jobs model will change, and the org charts will change, and the skill sets will change, but the outputs and things we're trying to create won't change. People still need to be informed. People want to be entertained and feel safe and feel loved and feel needed and feel, you know, status and all these other things, but the delivery systems will change. And that's why I'm optimistic about creativity. You know, people were decrying robots will be taken over by robots in the 1920s when they first, I think that's when the word robot was around that was actually created. And people were like, oh, automation's going to take over, robots are going to take over. That's why all those sci-fi started to do that. And we're just there now, but just with, you know, more proof points.
Well, even going back to like the printing press was seen as like an evil propaganda machine that was going to sort of make everyone take up witchcraft.
I mean, my love of our imaginations and the potential of thinkers and doers, it transcends and it eclipses my loyalty to, you know, types of technology that were, you know, I'm not moaning that I love a typewriter. Now I have it as a almost like a sculptural piece. I didn't bemoan the fact that I didn't write on typewriters anymore. You know, and I didn't care that when, you know, I used to have a typography department when I was in Saatchi, London, brilliant typography department. You know, when technology allowed us to do type in new ways and different ways, my love of type and the necessity of type didn't disappear. You know what I mean? And so my loyalty is to the output and the opportunities that they open more so than, you know, I'm not sort of trying to unionize our jobs. You know, and what I'm trying to do is unionize our output.
We often talk to them about craft, don't we, as something, and I think that's something that we have to probably protect, don't we, with new technology? Because so the output I tend to see, it all looks very similar, doesn't it, when you see AI-generated output?
Yeah, cool.
And that sort of love and craft and care and nuance.
Well, that's the point I'm saying is I think everyone's still excited and intimidated by the parlor trick of, oh, you can do that much output and you can create this image or this moving image or this logo and all that sort of, and it does a fine job to to be dominant and to be as disruptive as it is, AI only has to be better than average, and it already is. Great. You know what I mean? Fantastic. You could design, open up an art gallery or a coffee shop tomorrow, and it could design you 10 logos in 5 minutes that you would be really chuffed to have. Build you the website, do some marketing material, all those things. Fantastic. That's great. And let everyone have at it, and let all the people do that. But eventually, as I said, when everybody has that, what's going to be the difference? It's going to be the imperfections of how we think and how creative people think. I mean, I said this in an op-ed that I wrote. Like AI is designed, and technology is designed to avoid error. Okay, it's built around, like, the worst thing that can happen in a program or an algorithm is error, a bug. You know what I mean? It's designed to be perfect and deliver all that sort of stuff. Everything that makes us interesting is the errors, is how we misrepresent or misinterpret or reinterpret or context or angst and all these things that make us human. That's what makes us creative. So, that's the sort of the tension between the two. You know what I mean? And when you imply what makes us human, which is our bugs, our personalities, all that sort of stuff, and you put that's what separates us from that.
I can't remember who said this, so I'm probably going to misquote them, but they were saying that the last thing AI will be able to work out is human stupidity.
Well, that's true. Same thing, because we don't make sense. Exactly. That's what I mean by, our personalities are our quirks and our bugs and the way we look at the life. And it can be from upbringing, context, it can be from emotional devastation, or it can be from great things, it can be desires, needs, personality trait, all those things. You have yours, I have mine, all that sort of stuff. And how that manifests out in the world, is, put some skill to it and all that sort of stuff. No one can replicate that. Now, yeah, sure, I'm a writer. I know that I could put into AI, write a paragraph that sounds like David Droga wrote it, and it would probably do a fine job. But it's not going to be thinking how I'm thinking at that moment and what I want to get across right then and there. And I might be pissed off that morning, or I might be sad or happy or excited about something. And those sort of multi-layers, that's what I think is that gives me optimism, that the necessity of us is going to be, it's going to be the forward scout with technology. So I'm not anti AI and technology. I'm wary that it's going to be too easy and convenient. And it's, laziness is the thing that worries me more than technology, is human laziness.
That's interesting, because there's already, I think, research suggesting that people using AI are thinking less, because they're kind of outsourcing the thinking to AI, and therefore they're not training themselves to think through a problem, make the creative leaps. Yeah,
I just don't want, as I said, going back to the averages thing, I don't want good enough to be good enough. You know what I mean? Because we're going back to, you were talking about researching things and the averages. People celebrate better than average now. They even celebrate average. And I think that the world needs all these people who are filled with provocations and ambitions and, want to blow things up or want to create greatness or whatever it is, just to drag us and into lateral, deep places that move us forward. And that's what's so exciting. That's why I love being creative. I love being a creative person, because you have permission to be outrageous and a daydreamer and think about possibilities, and without really understanding the mechanics of things, and you can always backfill that. You know what I mean? I just think that's it's exciting to be a creative person.
Love that a lot. As you look back on your career, what you created with Droga 5, what are you most proud of leaving in terms of your kind of legacy over that time?
It's not a piece of work or anything. I think that I'm proudest of the fact that since day one, when I was sort of, fortunate enough to find my footing in this industry, that I grew along the way. In every place I went, I sort of felt that I contributed and learnt a lot creatively, and did it with a lot of great people. I produced a lot of work that I'm very proud of, but I felt like I grew with. I didn't plateau emotionally, mentally, ambition-wise. My care didn't plateau. Like, I just kept on snowballing and moving forward, and it allowed me to go all over the world and prove to myself, maybe that's an insecurity in myself. I probably hide behind ego, but it's, there's part of insecurity in that as well. It's just like you just want to be relevant. You want to be contributing, and I was just always put myself in places. And sometimes that means deliberately challenging myself to find a harder task, to burst the bubble of security of running Saatchi London, to go to publicity, to burst the security of being the first worldwide creative, to start my own thing from, like I liked reinventing myself because it forced me to always want to prove that I'm a relevant person that is contributing daily and stuff like that. And I don't know. So my pride is in consistency. I said not just consistency of output, but consistency of belief. I have zero regrets in my career, which is
that's great. Yeah.
I mean, there are things I wish I'd done better, or it doesn't mean I haven't made mistakes or stumbled or anything like that. But I have zero regrets in my career of the choices I made about it, where I worked and how I did it and how I held myself up and stuff. There are business decisions I'm like, oh, I should have done this or should have done that or should have learned this lesson quicker. But I feel so grateful that I was, and maybe because I felt so fortunate, which is why I took it so seriously. Because I kept on thinking, to have had the opportunities I've had is so rare and special. I got to do everything I can to over-deliver on that, because you don't get given these opportunities and very often. And because I was given it all very often, I felt like I was getting away with something, and the only way to sort of make up for that was to exceed expectations. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
it does. It does. You said something last time we met, actually, which struck me, was you didn't have a business plan. You just had belief.
100%.
And that comes through in just what you said there, the belief in the next thing.
They're also, I'm blessed with a weird thing that would, probably stress a lot of people out. My belief system is sometimes a little bit blinding, where there are multiple times in my career where I stepped away from something that a reasonable person or a sensible person would never have walked away from. And there's probably 5 times in my career. I remember first job I had after I went to award school, I got a job my first job as a copywriter, actually. And very excited, couldn't believe it. I was so excited I got this job, paid for my imagination, and I was paid $30,000 a year, which was like being a millionaire. And even though I was living out of home. And this new agency in Australia started, and brilliant young age. The 2 people who were starting were 2 of the best young creatives in the country. And they said, come and work for us. We can only pay you 20 grand, so you have to take a 33% pay cut. We don't have any clients. We don't have any office furniture. And I remember saying to my dad, I'm going to quit this job at a big American multinational to go to this startup. They don't have any clients, no furniture. I'm the first employee, and I have to take a pay cut. It was like, you are insane. Definitely don't do that. Best thing I did, quit and did that. Same thing. It was just, I believed that they believed in good work. And I just thought, well, because they have the belief system, and I've seen work they've done in the past, that I'm going to hitch my wagon to that thing. And they were right, and I worked my ass off, and I slept at the agency 3 days a week. But we became a huge success. The agency became it was like an Australian agency here multiple times, and we grew. And because I was the first employee, my career was accelerated by that choice. And I was, creative director at 22. So it was, and then when that got bought by BBDO, actually, I was ready to leave to go on an adventure. Same thing, but I owned a quarter of the agency in stock at this stage. And same thing, signed the contract. They were like, you have to lock you down for 3 years. And I didn't want to stay. And I was betting on myself again, and I'd been offered to run Saatchi Asia. And again, I was 26 at the time. And everyone was saying, you just stay for 3 years, you'll make X amount of money, a lot of money, which was more money than I could even compute. Like, no, I want to do this thing because I want to explore the world. I want to be even more creative. And I remember saying to one of my partners, I said, I'll give you my equity. And they said, for what? Why would you give me? I said, in fact, I'll give you the equity if I can take that rug. I just pointed the first thing and they thought I was joking. I said, I'm not joking. You give me that rug, you can have my equity. I literally took the rug, gave my equity away so I didn't have to stay. Again, everyone was like, well, you're nuts. So there's so many times where I was blessed with that thing where I was never chasing. I was chasing work and building something and being part of something and proving something more than, because that's the privilege of and the innocence of youth, right? London was so grateful to have the success there. publicist got that job that I thought, everyone thinks they want to be the worldwide chief creative officer of a company, Same thing. And when I left that to go to do Droga Fire, I left behind millions and millions of dollars of equity. But I didn't care because I bet on myself that I'd rather build something without a business plan, but with a belief system and in the timing and enough experience around that I sort of knew that was worth a shot. And also I brought some great, so it's just, wherever I got that gene from, I don't know, because I didn't come from wealth and I didn't come, I never chased it. I chased, I don't know, just the idea of contributing and making something and the challenge of stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, I was very happy to build a very successful company, but, but there are certain decisions I made along the way that I think a rational person, and I'd probably, if someone was asking me for advice, I'd probably tell them to stay and not do the things, But because it was me, I just kind of always knew.
The thing that struck me about that is the power of the environment you put yourself in as well. So rather than chasing the big client, the name above the door, the salary, et cetera, you're putting yourself in a position where you could flourish because of the people you're with, the environment, the context.
Completely.
As well.
I mean, I've always liked putting myself in a position where there's something at risk, not like personally risk and something like that. And it's not, but I have to prove that I love. I don't know if that's because I'm a Leo or because I'm the fifth son in the family or whatever, but I wanted to prove that I could step into hard things and make them great. And I knew if I took these risks, like again, if I walk away from that, wow, you better be successful. You better make that success. That'd make you work harder. If you walk away from that, like I don't want the footnote to be that idiot did that. Again, I'm drawn by what could be more than what is.
There's something powerful about a big challenge, isn't there? I really relate to that because there's motivation, isn't there, where there's a really big challenge. You've got no option other than to lean in and make it a success rather than play it safe and repeat what you've done before.
I love when you can take the alibis away and it's just you and the rawness of the opportunity and your own talent and your own tenacity and your work ethic. There's just something pure about that. And I love being in my own head because, my wife sort of teases me that I sort of, I like my own company a lot. Where I sort of like to think about things. And there's something great about that. It's a privilege to be able to try and unpack things and think things through. And what a great thing to be able to do.
Yeah. If you were to start today, let's just pretend you were starting out from scratch. Yeah. What would you do today? And would it be any different to how you started out, given that the world has changed, media channels have changed, technology's changed?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily start an advertising agency or anything like that. I definitely want to be it would have to be a creative endeavor. I'd have to thrust myself into a creative business, but I would look at how I can apply my creativity in what industry and where I think that I can add value. So it might be something, I'd be definitely compelled to understand AI and what I could do with that. You know what I mean? I don't know whether it be entertainment, whether it be healthcare, who knows? But I would definitely look at something where there's the biggest need for creativity and a platform for me to grow and learn. I like both. I want to contribute, but I also realize I want to learn at the same time. Like I think I want it to be this mutually beneficial relationship. Because that was also another reason I like throwing myself into challenges, and that can be the challenge of moving to Asia or London or America or starting an agency or joining a tech company. It's another step up and another gear to add to sort of who I am, and I'm learning. There's everything was a different dimension to what I already believed. So no, I'm collecting things as though the experiences of all those places were not lost when I went to the next thing, but then I added another dimension. And I think that's always sort of something that I'm a collector of things and I'm a hoarder of, I've always collected art and things like that. So maybe this is just another thing. I'm sort of a collector of experiences and learnings and experiences, and because then I can apply them. Because isn't that creativity? Creativity is parlaying taking something and making more of it.
I think that's the lovely thing about creativity is the circumstances may change, technology may change, but the need for creativity
and
problem solving is
It's
eternal.
never gonna
It's
go away.
always been here. You know what I mean? That's not
It's
going
who we are
nowhere.
as, again, going back to it's who we are as people.
Yeah.
You know, it's who we are as people. Imagination is the world's greatest natural resource.
Yeah. Now, a lot of marketers be listening, and obviously Uncensored CMO is the premise of the podcast. What are some of the traits of the best clients that you work with? That what advice would you give, client-side marketers?
Well, they're probably blatantly obvious, and I would say to all marketers, by the way, a lot of respect to you, because I think one of the truths and the consistencies that the longer I've been in the industry, the more I have empathy for the how tough it is to be on that side, to be a CMO, because you're sort of trying to obviously deal with creatives and people and who are trying to help you and that side of things. And then you've got the mechanics of your business and the weight of that, and also the role of the CMO has changed so drastically. It's much more than just marketing these days. It's about influencing every other chair in the C-suite. It's about building brand and business, and also they're playing catch up. They're probably all the wave of new technology and media and deployment and all that sort of stuff is suffocating and exhausting. So I have a lot of empathy, and I think that was a big epiphany for me even when I first started Droga 5, because we started in the digital age, was not trying to sell to the person opposite the table. I was like, I really wanted to understand. Going back to that, I like to understand things. Like, what are they trying to solve for? What's the challenge? And if I can not just have empathy, but then the empathy will give me permission to try and understand from their chair. So when I do try and solve something, it's the gears are matching. There's an interlock between what they're trying to solve for and what we're trying to bring to the table, as opposed to just, because in my early days of my career, sometimes I thought the sheer genius of our creativity was going to solve everything. But I also think, other things I would say is a lot of my favorite clients were not the easiest, by the way. It's not like, they just love everything we do and all that. There's clarity. There's an appreciation of strategy. There's a desire for, or permission for, creativity. It doesn't mean you always have, permission for grounded creativity, so there's a reason for it, and an appreciation of craft. And also, an honesty. I've always said to a client, like, if you don't like something and there's a reason you don't like it, or tell me. I'd rather have the most frank conversations. I'm confident and arrogant enough to think that I can solve it if this isn't the right answer. I don't need to be coddled, to be like, to have broken it to me slowly. So a lot of my favorite clients were really tough, but we had very honest relationships. You know what I mean? And then when there's a trust built, people have heard me say this before. I mean, it's the most intimidating thing any client can do, is to trust the agency.
Oh, totally.
Because going back to taking out the alibis, it takes the alibis out.
It does.
Now, you have to earn trust. It can't be blind. But so I've, as I said, some of the work that I'm proudest of it, because also some of the work of my work that people think, oh, that must have been impossible to sell. I'm like, no, it was some of the most ambitious stuff was easier to sell, because there was a logic and a strategy behind it and an understanding behind it. So when you explain the reason for why we were doing something before we got to what the idea was, it was already almost completely sold. So when we did present the idea, they'd be like, of course, has to be X.
I think you talked about, we're not just making art to put in museums here. Yeah. And I think that's the crux of it. And often whenever I've been giving advice to agencies as a kind of former client myself, I'm like, start with the business problem that I'm trying to solve. Because at the end of the day, I've got to take this big idea you've got, go back to an organisation full of accountants, logistics people, salespeople, and explain how this is going to help us all achieve our...
Well, I think I might have said it to you on the last podcast, and if I did, just edit this out and drop in something more interesting. But, again, I start with the end, which is, why should anybody, the consumer or the receiving person on the receiving end of this, or the people on the receiving end of this, give a shit about this experience, this moment, this ad, this piece of communication, this app, this whatever. Why should they give a shit about it? And what roles are going to play in their lives? And are we interrupting them? Are we a speed hump in their life? Is it hitting them at the right time? Is it adding value? That value can manifest itself in different ways. It can be rewarding, entertaining, educating, helpful, create ease. There's all of those things. I love that everything's an opportunity to do something fantastic.
Now, you've come from, as you talked about, you started in Australia, Singapore, UK, US. You've literally covered the globe, haven't you?
Classic Aussie.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'd said I'd worked in a bar and all those places, that would have made sense as well.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. As you look around the kind of world today, what are you seeing? What trends are maybe overrated and what trends are underrated? Because as marketers, we are obsessed, aren't we, with, what's changing, what's new, that kind of thing.
I think the blindness to just celebrity is just something that drives me crazy. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there's some celebrity that have immense power for the right products, and they can do incredible things. But I think just there's a certain laziness to just slapping X person onto this thing and thinking that, and I'm like, it's no wonder, half the things don't work. When you've got one celebrity selling burgers and then perfume and then this and that, it sort of dilutes their brand. There's a certain laziness in that I don't like. But trends, I don't know. As I said, we're all trying to keep up with what's happening in the world now. And as I said, heads are spinning because they're trying to understand. We were talking about TikTok earlier as the power of that and how it does have for decision making hierarchy for certain things, particularly for the younger generation. It's phenomenal. It's insane the power it has. You know what I mean? And again, it's so I don't turn my nose up at things if I don't completely understand them either. I'm sort of much more intrigued to understand how and why, and then I think about, like, can I contribute to that, or I just have to get out of the way of that? You know what I mean?
For me, I think it comes back to, are you clear about your strategy often with these things, isn't it? Because there are so many, you can make an argument for anything these days, can't you? For being on TikTok, for maybe using celebrities, not using celebrities, or, building a brand in traditional media, new media, all those kind of things, or being an experienced brand. There's so many kind of like tactics out there.
But that's more what I mean. It's like with the celebrity thing. It's like with all these platforms, if you know what you're doing on these things, then it's fantastic. But just there are too many decisions where it's someone reads a report that says, oh, this medium, is huge with the youth and blah, 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 blah. And they scrunch up something that was probably intended for a different medium and force it into that. And it's out of context. And it's like, that drives me crazy. Yeah. I'm always seeing this thing. I'm thinking, who approved that? Yeah. The amount of times I've said in my career, actually, and I've always used to joke, people would always say, I'd always see something. If I ever saw a great piece of advertising, a lot of times I'd be like, who created that? And I'd want to find out who wrote that or art directed that, because I'm thinking, maybe I should hire them. And when I saw an absolute piece of garbage on television or advertising, I'd always like, I need to find out who sold that. Because maybe that's who I should hire.
I was going to say, you should hire them.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, how do you sell that garbage?
Yeah.
Imagine giving them something great. You know what I mean? Because there's so many things where I'm like, sometimes even when I see terrible films, I'm like, there had to be dozens and dozens of approval processes in that. And I think sometimes, crappy things just have momentum. You know what I mean? It just, once it's rolling downhill, no one can stop. You know what I mean?
guess sometimes those things is the creative is so inoffensive that no one can say no to it.
Well, I think a lot of that is, which is going back to that thing I was saying before about, clients try and be good clients, and they don't want to kill something, but they just tweak it and they compromise it. And a lot of also people on the creative side lie to themselves about something, even though what they've intended to make or believed in, it's a shadow of itself and it's been sort of compromised along the way. And so the end product is, you can't even identify what it started out as, but everyone still refers to it as the same thing, but it's nothing. You know what I mean? Like, everyone's tried to not hurt each other's feelings along the way, and you end up with this engineered mediocrity. You know what I mean?
Well, this is why we did the Costa Dole experiment, because we're trying to work out if you could actually show people how much they're losing by saying yes to those kind of idees.
But that's,
might incentivize
completely.
them.
That's why we did that Coinbase Super Bowl ad. Everyone was in. It's also, that's what the thing that I always say is one of the most under-leveraged parts of communication and marketing is context. Everyone talks about canvases and content and all that. Context is often
huge,
most important.
Yeah.
That can be timing and all that. Is look at the medium. Look at where you are, what everyone else is doing. How are you going to stand out? Like, what's the messaging? What do you want to do? Like, context is such a massive thing. You know, we have context when we're, as humans, when we talk to each other. You know what I mean? How I talk to you in a setting like that, you know, but a lot of times when we're in a business setting, everyone talks to everyone like they're in a boardroom with each other. And I'm like, people aren't watching this in a boardroom.
Well, actually, going back to the AI point, like that's often where AI doesn't answer the question. It doesn't understand the context or what's going on in culture at the time or where your brand is, you know, and that's where the, you know, humans are critical to understand context and culture and all that.
As I said, it's our bugs.
Yeah, exactly.
That are going to be the thing that saves us.
Yeah.
And saves creativity.
So let's talk about some of the work over the years. I love the fact that the other day, I think you wrote, was it 37 lessons from 37 campaigns?
Oh, yeah. They asked to pick 37 campaigns and some stories behind them to represent my 37 years in advertising.
You started early, right? As you said, you're out.
I was at 18.
You know,
so I started
at 5,
at 18.
weren't you? Yeah.
At 18. So I'm okay. True. But even that was, you know, I don't really have a big rear vision mirror, so it was kind of lovely and sentimental to look back.
Yeah. I mean, we'll come to some of those in a minute. Are there any ideas that you've had over the years that never saw the light of day that you think, man, I wish that one had come to life? Yeah,
definitely. I think I may have talked about. Did I talk about the GE building in our first one? I might have.
I think you pitched didn't you pitch that as an idea?
A building for GE.
Yeah,
that was actually because that was the first thing, the very first idea that we created at Droga 5 to present and make, which was, you know, for the Olympics, instead of doing a TV and poster campaign, to actually build a building, take all the money, like $60 to $80 million that would have spent on a global campaign, and build a building in the middle of the Olympic City, and that made out of all GE technology, and it was going to purify the river in Beijing. And so take all their products and actually create a product demonstration that would last the test of time. And we had Philip Stark design the building, we had Bill McDonough, you know, help us be an authority on that. And this I did from my dining room table, and I was sort of writing contracts in an internet cafe because I just moved. Still to this day, I'm like, but that building would have been magnificent because it's just a proof concept. It'd still be standing today, and it'll be an exhibition centre now. And they actually approved it, which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But the Beijing Olympic Committee didn't approve it because they didn't want to, because they, as you saw, some of the buildings they built in Beijing were rather extraordinary. I don't think they wanted anything that competed with that. But it's interesting, it would have cost the same as that, as the regular campaign.
But well, to actually build the building would be the same as a normal campaign?
Yeah, wow. 80 million.
Does force you to think, doesn't it? What could you do with that money?
I know, you know, but the thing about it is it set in motion right from the get-go was present what you think is the right idea. I'm not an architect expert. I wasn't a sustainability expert. I'm interested in both, but you know, I believed that was the right idea. And also a great idea brings people to the table. The fact that Philippe Stark, I just picked up the phone and called him, told him, he's like, yeah, I'll be there. He flew to Beijing with me. You know what I mean? It's like unbelievable. We're a 3-person agency.
That's insane.
You know what I mean? But it made me remind me, I'm like, okay, always do the right thing and present what you like. And then the second thing I did after that was echo. And I just kept on thinking like that, which is what is the right thing? You know, the right thing may be the most traditional thing ever, or it might be. And I've tried to broaden the perspective of what marketing and advertising could be, and also broaden the perspective of who can contribute to that and who we can partner with. And that's why I made the deal with, you know, Endeavour, and that's why I sort of with Accenture. But there are things that I've made. I mean, I think the number one thing that there's many campaigns and ideas that I wish had happened. There's always, I think every single creative person has a graveyard full of things that they think are on life support their whole life. They don't ever acknowledge that they're dead. They just think that they're on life support somewhere, that they can be resuscitated. But I think one of the ones that people forget that before, I actually wished I put it in that 37. If they'd asked me for 38, I might have put it in there. Between Publicis and before Droga 5, there was a period of about a year and a half, 2 years, where I tried to build a advertising entertainment network called Honeyshed, which was a sort of an online mix, as we called it. It was QVC meets MTV. And we had hosts, and we had a whole studio in LA, and we were filming content and all that. And the thing about that is the idea is exactly what influencers are today. It's what's happening on TikTok today. It's 20 years ago. You know, it had girls trying on lipstick and telling about lipstick, gamers talking about games, sneakerheads talking about, you know, that, you know, 4 or 5 hosts. The problem was before the iPhone, so content we were shooting was $30 grand to shoot a 3-minute spot. Now you do it for $10. We built a very janky piece of shit interface because I didn't understand it enough. You know what I mean? This is again about, I was so taken by the creative and the idea that I didn't put enough into the execution. I didn't partner with the right technology people, and we built something that was just very janky. And it was way too early. Now, had I built that 10 years later, it would have been rather great.
That would have been rather good, wouldn't it?
Rather great. But it was an amazing experience, amazing learning experience, because the premise there, I sort of did it with Smuggler, and actually Publicis were a partner in that. That was when I resigned from Publicis, I wasn't to start Droga 5. It was to, I said I wanted to start this entertainment network. And I explained to an advertising network. I said, it's going to be an advertising network that doesn't hide the fact it's advertising. Because most, I'd come from where advertising had to be the best advertising. But it was a trade-off. You didn't pretend to be advertising, you just do stuff that was really interesting, engaging, and entertaining. And this was, let's be overt about the fact we're advertising, but let's make it so helpful to those who know what they want. And we built this thing, and I think we shot 200 hours of content. We had 4 full-time hosts. One of those hosts was, I think it was his first job, was Michael B. Jordan, the actor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was a fantastic, fun thing to do, but it was too early. We didn't have the cameras to be able to do it properly where you can do it now. I didn't have the tech expertise and the connections to build something, and audiences weren't quite ready for it. And clients, we had maybe 100 different clients who go, it so could have been one of those ones, but it was just...
You are right, because you have just described the content creator industry, haven't you? The creator economy.
100%.
Is exactly that, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I was just 15 years too early.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Now, there's a lovely little quote in the article you wrote, which struck me. You said, the size of the idea is 50 times more important than the size of the budget.
Completely.
Which I just thought was awesome.
Always. 100%. Ideas are the thing that are contagious and spread.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's no ceiling to the size of an idea. There's just no, or lifespan. There is an expiration date and a ceiling to a budget. Now, if you can combine the two, then it's unbelievable. But if I had to choose every time, if someone said, you can have the best idea with a small budget or a terrible idea with a massive budget, I'd choose the great idea every single time. And that's, again, proof point about why you should pay for thinkers and ideas and creatives, because it's the proof's out there all the time. There's been Super Bowls where the most memorable thing is a tweet. You know what I mean? The Coinbase ad cost probably the catering budget of every other thing. There's things on the internet that just, I just think that a great idea, and sometimes it doesn't always have to be just in communication as well. Sometimes great ideas, half the ideas that a lot of these Silicon Valley billionaires have are very, very simple ideas, just great ideas.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
You mentioned Super Bowl as well. What would you say, if you flip it, you're talking about budget there, what would be the best campaign you've done on a small budget?
Well,
and there are quite a few examples, actually, in your 37.
A lot, yeah. There's probably... Coinbase was obviously one because it was just so... against the grain and so cheap and just fun to make. It was a middle finger to everything, which is part of the spirit of crypto as well. It's a middle finger to capitalism and convention, all that. And I loved the fact that, as I said, 20 million people literally, I think it's got to be the highest IRI ever on that, but also 90 million people didn't get it. I think the one we did in the beginning were early Droga 5 days, which was If We Made It for Newcastle.
Oh, I love that.
Which was just absolutely like, how do we celebrate the fact that we can't afford to be on the Super Bowl? We've got enough money just to be a bee in your ear and buzz and just create something. And also, again, context, just play with the rituals and the gamification of the, ridiculous nature of the scale of the Super Bowl and who's the competing, and sort of like an arms race. And just, we just paid enough for an emerging celebrity to be this person, researching storyboards, the most cliched story we wrote and all that sort of stuff. The irony is we could have made that today because of AI, but it wouldn't have been better.
No, it wouldn't.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we could have actually afforded to make it, but it wouldn't have been better.
No.
Because the story was in the fact that it couldn't be made, and it was raw and primitive, and everyone was upset, and it was again, there was great humor in the fact that we were scrappy and da-da-da. Had we turned around and said we made this commercial, and because it would have just been a...
Yeah.
And again, it was sort of a rubbing up against, but the right spirit of humour for the Super Bowl. That was a good one to make. The Australian tourism one, the Dundee, that was a lot more expensive, but that was fun, very fun to make as well. And then the scale of budgets went up. We had the one from our UK office, which was very big budget, was the Amazon one, which was very successful, the Ellen DeGeneres one.
Oh, that was genius. I was because in my day job at System, when we measure all the Super Bowl ads, and that was like number 3 out of all the Super Bowl ads that year, because it was funny, like brilliant story, loads of emotion in there.
Yeah,
and you knew exactly what it was. It was
exactly.
Like product demo in the most clever way, right?
And I think, actually another favourite, gosh, I forgot how many ones I liked, was, again, it was expensive, but it was the audacity of it was because we were doing Game of Thrones, I convinced Bud Light to let me kill their mascot.
I remember that, yes.
But remember, Bud Light wasn't our client. Game of Thrones was. And they were like, we want to do a Super Bowl commercial. And we just thought, well, what's the most Game of Thrones thing to do is, to kill. We sort of, let's have the mountain kill someone. And the thing is, it was outright. This is again about, what I was saying earlier, is great ideas, they just break down barriers, and great people want to be part of great ideas. And obviously there's a certain momentum and hype for Game of Thrones. But I had to go on the site, I literally had to send an email through a friend who worked at AB in Brazil, because I didn't want any paper trail, to the person who was running Bud Light in America, to set up a meeting with he and I in a coffee shop, because I didn't want it to get out. Because if he did agree, it couldn't get out, this thing. And if he didn't agree, because as I said, I'm basically going to tell him, we have to kill your mascot and the Bud Knight. So just do it. I was laughing so much thinking about this meeting that we're going to present it, but I really thought it was the right thing. But in my head, I was thinking, if he says no, my next meeting is going to be with Burger King. We're going to kill the Burger King. And I don't know if I told this one last, and if he or she said no, we were going to go to Coke, and I was going to have the White Walkers wipe out the polar bears. So I had this.
That's good.
So I had this fallback position. But again, one of those things where you think the things that would be so hard to do. And I remember presenting to the client and took them through why this. And they're no fools. They realise that, Game of Thrones is a very, very, very... This was going to be the finale. Pop culture at its highest order. And I was also very respectful because, the Bud Knight was being done by Wyden and Kennedy. And I said, look, if you approve it, we'll pay for the production of the first part. You have to pay for the media. And also you have to pay for your... But we'll pay for our part of it. And so we had the director and shot all the mountain stuff. But the second that the Bud Knight thing is, we had Wyden people come on set. Because I called Colleen at Wyden and said, listen, I've just sold something to your client, but I've said, to respect for you, I won't try and get my fingerprints on anything to do with the Bud Knight. Your team can. And they were like up for it. They were like, this is amazing. So then, but my only nervousness was, how do you keep it secret? You know what I mean? So that was a lot of fun. So Super Bowl's been very good to me. I've had so much fun with some of the Super Bowl stuff.
I mean, the common theme through all that is the role of humour, isn't it? And that's
the role of humour, and also being subversive in a way that is rewarding. Do you know what I mean? Like there's always a twist that's not just a twist for the sake of it. The twist is relevant to the Coinbase twist is relevant to tech people. Do you know what I mean? Who are sort of embracing that sort of stuff of, simplicity, retro, but also the, QR codes and da-da-da. The beer one, Newcastle. I mean, that's right for that sort of that northern English humour of woe is me. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we can't afford one, bummer. You know what I mean? That sort of stuff. And whereas all the American beers are all like, yay, and all that sort of stuff. The Game of Thrones one is dark. Do you know what I mean? Just nothing is sacred type of thing. And that was the whole thing with Game of Thrones. I mean, how many times you watch stuff and your favourite character was killed, you're like, what? You can't kill that person. You can't kill her. You can't kill him. So that was the thing. Like, of course we should do that. So there's just, I love, the surprise is worth it. It's not just a rug pull where it's like, whoa, that's crazy. It's faithful to the brand. I always think that's as well really important, that whatever ideas you have, the creativity can't be at loggerheads with the personality of the brands. Like sometimes you see things on television like, what? That's not the personality of that brand. Whether it be humor, whether it be esoteric, whether it be, I'm always like, that's just a creative or a company forcing their personality to sort of hijack that. And that's why I'm big on, our job is to amplify things for our brands, not to sort of try and have one flavor. I loved being part of a company that could do that, but that could also do, Prudential or New York Times or Under Armour or, like very different tones. Our job is to be faithful to them. It's not to put, a Droga 5 or a Song personality onto them. And I think that was one of the reasons we were also successful. There wasn't a Droga 5 style. There isn't a Droga 5 house style.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, when I looked at 37, the breadth of the work is
astonishing. I was very fortunate. I was very fortunate to hire a lot of very talented people of very different skill sets. And there was the teams that were more comedy, and there were the teams that were the more artsy, and there were the teams that were much more esoteric or gamified, and there's. I imagine for lots of different companies, you have, different flavor profiles, different, basketball shoes are very different to football cleats, and, you've got to have different. And I always wanted I've still to this day, even with Song, our job is to sort of burrow in and be the very best of what we can be, but in service of this client, in service of their consumer, in service of that. You know what I mean?
You used a phrase on, I think it was the Puma campaign about untapped potential, which I thought was very interesting, because a lot of marketers kind of get bored, don't they, of their work and keep on changing it. Yeah. But you're talking about the strength of the idea and how it could have gone on. And it reminded me, actually, you talked about a smuggler earlier, actually. I was on Lucozade in the UK, and we came up with this amazing platform called Made to Move. It was a brilliant insight. As human beings, we're all designed to move, right? And we decided our purpose was to help. Really, really simple, right? Let's help get the nation moving, healthier nation, all the rest of it. And with this amazing film with Anthony Joshua, because he was about to do his biggest ever fight. And so the idea that the team pitched is, before he goes out to his biggest fight, we're going to take the entire ad break. I think it's like 3 minutes or something. And we're going to show this little film of him being born, taking his first steps, gets into trouble with the police, ends up in jail, comes out, gets a job on a building site, learns to box as rehabilitation, and ends up, in the biggest kind of fight of his life. Just show that human story arc kind of thing. And actually Smuggler were the team that worked on it, and we won some cans for it. I mean, it's just like magical, but it was like done on but the platform we were building was this, we wanted to make the next kind of Nike, just do it and build this kind of made to move kind of movement effectively. And I remember I was only kind of there 2 years, and then I remember a couple of years later, the team had just changed the idea, changed the platform.
It's hard that. I always think
it's really hard, isn't it?
Well, I think there's two parts to that. There's sometimes things need to move because platforms have been sold that are disposable, and that's what I mean about they're not grounded in truth about the company or the consumer or stuff like that. And other times when they do have these great potentials, people get. Markets are feisty, and people come in and they want to prove themselves, and they think the first thing to do is discard something and start from scratch. I'm like, if there's ever a poster child for that, 911 is a great example. The car. Do you know what I mean? Are people bored of the shape of that car? It gets tweaked. It hasn't. It's how it's revered hasn't changed at all, and it's still on the. You know what I mean? Sometimes people discard things way too soon and there's ways you can deploy it. And that's why, again, now is such a more interesting time, because it's not just a battle of storytelling and experience. I mean, we can build things that stand the test of time, create experiences, change commerce, add value in different ways. That's why I loved the sort of what we're doing with Song. We can build programs and new business ideas, not just communication ideas. And I think that's where we can show up and contribute and create these new interactions with consumers. Yeah, it's fantastic.
We did this, we did this project with Effie's, actually. Yeah. We looked at the Effie database, and we looked at loads of campaigns over a US, UK, long period of time. And we looked at what was making campaigns successful. There's some things in there that you expect, like, emotion versus logic, or, how well branded things are and that kind of thing. The biggest lesson was the role of time. literally compounding. It was it was basically the campaigns that were consistent, that stayed.
Yeah.
No, not that they were the same thing every year,
Yeah.
but the idea was faithful. That all those kind of things, and you literally just saw this big gap emerge over time where the brands were similar, and then literally over time the consistent ones. Just
That's the thing. I mean, again,
lead,
it's going to sound contrary to what we were saying earlier about people like certainty, and I mean that that it's weird because people like the certainty of a category or the people who make those decisions, and that leads to dullness. But then, as you said, when you've got something good, you can always take it up a notch. I mean, that's why I liked what the 7 years we did the stuff for the New York Times. It was all built around the same sort of platform, but it was every different version of it was a unique experience of it. You know what I mean?
Describe that a little bit for anyone who hasn't come, because that's really powerful, the New York Times work.
Well, it started very simply in Droga 5, where it was just, the truth is worth it. So it was just very much, it wasn't necessarily selling the paper, but it was just selling the sort of the virtues and the belief system of the paper. And it was also context, because you look at, the truth was up for grabs. And then, but it was, every story was told through the journalist's work, through the, all the content that was ever shown was stuff that was created in the newsroom and from the photographers and everything. So again, the real sign of creativity is knowing when to use it and what to use. And sometimes you can be, we don't try and get in the way of things that are even better. Like nothing we create is going to be stronger or more powerful than the actual news stories and what's happening in the real world. We've just got to create a platform that allows us to bring that alive. That's, again, going back to the start, like it's such a privilege to have all these storied brands and important things, and we can toggle. I used to love walking down the corridor, and sometimes I'd walk out of one room reviewing work for, say, the Super Bowl, laughing my face off. And then I'd walk into another room and talk to a team about trying to save journalism and begin really caught up in that. And then you walk to another room and you're like, of course, who doesn't want to have that job? Who doesn't want to have that job and that responsibility? But it's such a great responsibility. That's why we work our asses off to deliver great stuff. And the way to preserve that more so is to, as I said, is to understand what's going on with technology and not be quaint and just keep that in its purest form that was relevant a couple of years ago, the expressions of the executions, as I said, the intentions of what we're trying to do, but use the new tools to do that.
I mean, something that struck me as well, reading through your list, was the power of simplicity. And that there was, I didn't know you were behind this NHS campaign.
Oh, yeah.
That really struck me, and that was emotional. And it was so, if you can describe that, it was so simple.
Well, that was one of the first things I did when I went to London, and with Frank Budgeon, Duncan Howard, and that was an amazing campaign. That's for the national, it's for the NSPCA, which was sort of the child abuse, which is the fact that it even is so bad. And it's one of those things where things like child abuse, just like animal abuse, and also like famines and things like that, people become so immune to it, or they shut it down because they don't want to deal with it. So I like the idea of creating a film that juxtaposed a father, but the kid in the picture was, in the imagery, was a cartoon kid, and it had all the sound effects and silliness of cartoons that are sort of almost mask everything. So as the father is, I hate to say it, like beating the kid or hitting the kid or kicking the kid or putting a cigarette out the kid, it has that cartoon sort of elements where it's like, oh, ow, bump and all this sort of stuff. But it was so different way of seeing it that you'd still watch it and get to it because it still felt abstract. It didn't feel real. You weren't sure whether you would laugh or cry. And at the end I hate even saying this because it makes me upset. When he throws the cartoon kid down who pees his pants down the stairs, and it goes bounce, 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 ding, 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 and then it pans down to the bottom of the floor, and you realise it's a real kid.
Oof.
And the point was like real children don't bounce back and da 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 because. But it was again, our job is for something like that is to how do you make a very, very, very crucial message get to the audiences and make a point, instead of them just shutting down or feeling like, because sometimes you can deliver hard messages too hard and our job is to understand context and all that sort of stuff. And you're thinking about simply, there's no question, I'm a very simple person. Like I really am. I'm a very emotional person, or I'm more emotional than most. Almost every decision I make is emotional. And there's immense power in simplicity. There's immense power. It doesn't mean that complexity can't be beautiful too. Sometimes it can if it's appropriate. but I don't need to prove any. I never thought we needed to prove anything to how many layers or how complex the thing. And, we've done very complex things that are very ambitious, the Jay-Z Bing thing, like multiple thousand spinning plates type of thing. But the idea is simple. The premise is simple. Yeah. So my starting place is always, if the idea is simple and true and the strategy is robust and real, that gives you permission to be outrageously creative because there's something to come back to. If there isn't a backbone of reasoning and strategy and ownership of it, then all creativity does is take you further away into sort of confusion and to, an abyss. But if there's something that you always go back to, a red thread back to something that's permanent, then you can be much as creative as you want.
Totally. I've reflected on my career. I think I spent most of my career trying to take the complex and make it simple for people, because the complex answer is usually the easy one. Ironically, isn't it?
Complex is
it's really hard to get to simple, and yet, human nature is we love easy, right?
Well, we love easy, but we also love to be able to understand things. The wonderful thing you can do for anybody is explain something to them or make them understand something. That's a gift you can do.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It starts with our kids, and also that's why again I'm obsessed with. I love meeting people that are passionate about anything. Like my ideal dinner party would be go to a dinner party and there were 10 different guests who are obsessed with the most random things. And that could be horticulture, that could be whale noises, it could be ceramics, whatever it is, basketball, and just getting out of them a lifetime of their passion condensed into an hour. Like, I feel like that's the greatest gift. And I always go down rabbit holes, which is dangerous. I had a conversation, this is not exaggeration. There's this fantastic digital designer that we hired, who's won an Academy Award actually, and he is in LA. And we were at a dinner recently, and his passion is bonsai trees, random. We talked for the whole time about bonsai trees. I've literally found myself at home I made him send me links to bonsai trees. I even said to my wife, until she's basically, metaphorically slapped me down, was like, we are not getting a bonsai tree. I suddenly was like, we got to get this bonsai tree. Look at this Saturday. It was just so, and I got caught up in every part of it because it's the lure and story and craft, and you know what I mean? I just love, that's why we love sport, right? Like that's why, I love American football now. And when I lived in Australia, I didn't understand it. I used to laugh at it thinking it was, that's absurd, it's stupid. But as soon as you understand what's at stake, what matters in this play, what this player is, their backstory, what this city's like, we love to understand things, and then it makes you care about things, and that so that's why I give that random segue story. But that's also our job is like, why should someone care about the brand? Why should they care about the message? Why should they care about what you like? Our job is to find that connection, and sometimes it's wrapped in humor, and sometimes it's wrapped in mystery or experience and virtues that. But what a privilege.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well, maybe to round off then, a slightly left field question. Then, what's the most Aussie thing you've ever done? Wow, most Aussie thing I've ever done. Well, the most Aussie thing is, this is an easy answer, is, pack up a bag and just leave the country and happily travel around the world. Because that's where, at any given time, Australia has a population of 24 million, I think it is. I think I read some stat once that said 5% of Australians are abroad at any time. Wow.
As I said, usually working in a bar or running a company.
Yeah.
And we're easy travelers because we like to sort of, because we're a young country, so we sort of assimilate well. And, we're always up for a good time. So I think that's probably the most Aussie thing I've done. But part of that is also because my mother was Danish, so I also had this European thing. She was sort of pushing me around out to sort of go and explore. But I'd also like to think, this is me now projecting or hoping, making work, even though, there's been a high intensity that I've worked at and hold people to a high expectation, keeping it very human and, always leaving room for humour and personality. Not just mine, but people's. Like always leaving. I think that's an Australian thing.
Yeah.
And so always making sure that that can exist. That's not checked at the door. I think that's probably...
And probably that skill set is going to be even more in demand, isn't it? As
absolutely.
As the world carries on.
Yeah, absolutely. These are the things that are lost in... that's also something that's lost when people work, remotely, and it's also lost when people get too corporate and too rule follow. Just they get too wound up and filled with angst, and you know what I mean. It's a human business after all. Every business is, almost, except for the AI business. But but even that is, you know what I mean. I just feel like.
Well, that's quite an Aussie thing, isn't it? Not to take it too seriously.
No, look, I
think
that's a better way of saying it. I definitely take the opportunity and the output and the business very seriously, but I never took the how we do it and how we hold ourselves too seriously.
Yeah.
Because as I said, that goes back to, aren't we the lucky ones? We got paid to solve problems and use our imagination to think and have fun and laugh at stuff and cry at stuff, and you sit across the table from people that give you some of the most immense challenges ever, and you're like, wow, they're sitting across asking me to help with that. That's unbelievable. And we have the skill sets, and we're an industry filled with some of the oddest people in the world, which is magnificent as well. And that makes it more interesting too.
It really does. Well, good luck with the next chapter,
much.
wherever it takes you, whatever it ends up being. Excited to see it. And
Thank you very much. No, I'm looking forward to just weaning my way and just sort of take, as I said, catching my breath for the first time. But I'm a creative, so I'm always going to be doing stuff, and I'm still got a lot of things here I want to achieve, just in a new version.
Great stuff.
Cheers,
David,
mate.
thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much for listening or watching Uncensored CMO. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please do hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching, hit subscribe there as well. I'd also love to get a review. Reviews make a big difference on other people discovering the show, so please do leave a review wherever you get your podcast. If you want to contact me, you can do. I'm over on X @UncensoredCMO, or on LinkedIn, where I'm under my own name, John Evans. Thanks for listening and watching. I'll see you next time.